Thank you. That was Blaze Reader, everyone. Blaze Reader, our former arts and culture associate who made that original piece of music for our manufacturing summit. And it is really awesome. I don't know how they did all of those things. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. We're going to get up a Mentimeter here in a second. And while we're doing that, I just wanted to say that if you would like to enable closed captioning during this webinar, you can do so by looking at the bottom right of your screen. You will see the word captions. You can click that and then click the option to enable closed captions, closed captioning. Alternatively, you may need to find the three dots on the bottom of the screen to enable closed captioning. And Dana just dropped the participant link in the chat. So if you guys could just answer what you're doing here today and what you're interested in learning. I know I'm really interested to learn from Appalachia today. I would like to, while we're waiting, talk a bit about why we're here today, why Reimagine and Appalachia are partnering, basically, and introduce some of our audiences to each other. I'll start off by saying Reimagine Appalachia is a diverse coalition of nonprofits, a diverse nonprofit coalition that promotes a shared vision for a 21st century economy that is good for communities, workers, and the land. Our work plan includes communications and storytelling, participatory research, and coalition building and convening. And Apple Shop is a media, arts, and education center based in Whitesburg, Kentucky. Its mission includes the following: document and disseminate and revitalize the lasting traditions and contemporary creativity of Appalachia, tell stories that commercial cultural industries don't tell, challenging stereotypes with Appalachian voices and visions, support community efforts to achieve justice and equity, and to solve their own problems in their own ways. And since this is the comms training, I invite everybody to drop in at any point in the meeting the username of their preferred social media channel, and we can all walk away with more followers. So yeah, it looks like we've got some answers to build social capital, and to connecting with perspective and current students, creating a shared social context, deepen connection with communities we serve. Sorry, these are all really small, but these are really wonderful answers. It's just small on my screen. And to build a broad coalition. Wow, these are really great. So thank you guys so much for answering this. And I'm really excited to learn about these things too and discuss these things. Um, Molly, if you're ready, I think we're ready to go to the presentation slide about our speakers. So I'm really excited to be joined today by Apple Shop's Community Media Initiative Director, Mimi Pickering. Mimi began learning filmmaking at Apple Shop in 1971. She is the recipient of numerous awards such as the Guggenheim Fellowship and two Kentucky Arts Council fellowships. Her documentaries include Chemical Valley, which aired on the PBS series POV, and Hazel Dickens, It's Hard to Tell the Singer from the Song. Mimi will share her insights on how to portray Appalachian communities authentically using video storytelling. We're also joined by Nick Lee. Nick is the internal media coordinator for Apple Shop Film. Their work has been featured in the Boondocks Film Festival, the Athens International Monthly Film Festival, and the Athens International Film and Video Festival. The work has recently been awarded with the Jack Spadero Documentary Filmmaking Award at the 2026 Appalachia Studies Association Conference. And Nick will be speaking with us about their work using media to smooth divisions over and reach out to people. So without any further ado, I'd like to get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about Reimagine's video campaign in the next slide. So Reimagine Appalachia has a video campaign, and it's kind of changed over the years. It really has a story of its own. We call it the Story of Hope video series. We did traditional video campaigns where we'd send a crew to various places in southwestern Pennsylvania to document big events that were part of the climate infrastructure package. So federal investments in grid renovations and renewables and things like that. But like so many people, we were impacted by major shifts to the climate infrastructure package. And so we had to find a new way to tell stories, even with funding being scarce. So we ended up developing something that started really small, but became a more collaborative approach that we now call participatory storytelling, where we basically reach out to community project leaders. And hello to everyone who's coming in. Thank you so much for joining us. Reach out to community project leaders, sending them instructions for how to document and create footage of their own community projects. Then they send us that footage and then we edit it into videos and distribute those stories and to raise awareness for those causes and inspire people. The next slide, please. Okay, so I'm really excited to talk about why community storytelling is important. So much of the large scale media information we get, it has to do with big people with a lot of money and a lot of power and influence, uh, basically shifting events that we have no control over. But when we look at community level stories, we see people who may have less material power, fewer resources, who may be significantly more marginalized than we are, but they're making significant changes in the communities that they actually interact with every day. And that does two things. One, it really energizes us, the storytellers, and us, the consumers of that information at the same time as it amplifies the voice of communities. So the types of stories Reimagine Appalachia tells, we tell stories of projects that communities are leading to improve flood resiliency. We do a lot of disaster resilience storytelling with the Central Appalachian Network. Shout out to Kara Parrish if you're on here. We also tell stories about community resolutions, solutions to persistent regional issues like food desert, water contamination, and a lack of economic opportunity. Next slide, please. We're really fortunate that, this last June, many of you are probably aware of research from the Trust for Civic Life, which is a collaborative that works to strengthen civic engagement and trust building in communities across the United States. And their new report release in June has a few really interesting key points. One of those points is that trust in national institutions is dropping while local trust grows. The next point is communities are better able to lay aside personal divisions when they take action together, more so than when they merely just have a dialogue. So it's not just enough to just talk about things or get a bunch of people in the room. People seem to be able to put a lot of difficult issues aside when they can take on projects together and build something together. The next thing is that agency and trust thrive in local communities. And we see on the right some data points, including that the average share of respondents of this survey expressed a great deal or a lot of trust in local institutions and organizations. And then you can see the other three topics have more to do with the national level of information consumption in institutions, and it's really low. So there's a lot of trust in rural communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's where video comes in because video has the power to show the action. And so that includes showing people taking collective action to improve their communities, not just disputing viewpoints. So much of what we see in the media is this narrative of irreconcilable differences, where, basically we get along with people based on you know, how much we have in common or how much we politically align. But what we're seeing from these data points is that, if you have a neighbor, and maybe you disagree with them, but if they show up for you when your yard is destroyed by a flood or when your medication goes off or goes bad because there's a power outage and you can't keep it cool, then you're able to kind of lay those aside. So that really tells us a lot about collective action. So video storytelling can show the action. It can portray community members as empowered. A big point in that Trust for Civic Life study was the element of empowerment and agency. And it can offer a template for community engagement. A lot of the really cool projects that we've documented in our video storytelling were inspired by other community level projects. And I wanted to include this quote that I think is beautiful by Howard Thurman, who was a mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King, who said that don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes people come alive and go do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And so that goes back into that agency people. People want agency thing. People want to feel engaged and a part of their community and part of the action. Okay, so breaking down how we do our storytelling. So I told you before that we have a participatory approach where we have engaged with communities and send them instructions for how to film themselves. So that includes a list of questions. We send them prompts asking them to basically interview themselves. They describe what the problem is they're trying to solve in their community. Then we ask them about the project's impact. Then we ask them what assistance they need. So a lot of people ask when you have a storytelling initiative, who are you trying to move or what are you trying to make happen? And, generally it's trying to move policy, but a lot of time people might need all kinds of things. And I'll talk about that later, but defining what the communities need, and then we can amplify those needs to our coalition. Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. And then another really important aspect is, trusting that communities know what's best for them. And that's not to say that the person you interview always has all the answers. Of course, nobody has all the answers. But a lot of the questions, a really helpful question and prompt that I always love to include is asking questions that draw out tangible sensory, visual showcases of what the communities want for their homes. So you might say, like, take for instance the water contamination in southern West Virginia. You might say, you want a solution to that. Okay, what policy would you propose? And someone might not know, just like none of us necessarily know what policy is needed for the things we want to see change, but that many of them will know. But if you ask, what would it be like if you had if the water systems were working as they should and the water was not contaminated, and getting answers like, I can see it just being like, I can trust my faucet, I can trust that my kids can drink and be safe. I want to feel like my elected representatives are believe in my dignity enough to know that I need the same access to clean water to bathe myself and drink and as they do. And so getting on the record like what the vision is, because those things, just basic dignity, being able to trust your water systems or being able to trust your lawmakers, those are really that's normalcy. So when you describe a kind of a normalcy that we all should be entitled in, it inadvertently also points out what's going wrong at the same time. So we don't always necessarily need to get on the record, okay, here's the best, policy solution. And then the last thing on this slide is work to evoke a vision, work to evoke that vision through beautiful imagery. Never forgetting, and I always try to tell myself to remember this, is how much people love their community. So it's not just going in and going, oh, here's a problem. Always asking what they love about it, what they see as beautiful about it, their hopes for it, and then trying to capture that beautiful essence. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. And then the third thing is, of course, knowing your audience. A lot of people know it's like if you want to convince lawmakers, you're going to want to show that a large, broad constituency is on board with a solution or a change that they want to see. Avoiding politically charged words like climate justice in favor of, shared terms like shared home or local environment, showing trusted stakeholders and representatives are on board, police officers, church leaders, and those are, of course, very trusted entities and schools. And then showing a unified rejection of stopgap measures that won't necessarily work. There's a lot of, with the water crisis, there was a lot of proposals that, to address the water crisis, that weren't what the communities wanted, like filtration systems using sand and things like that. And maybe they would be helpful, but not really, they're not part of that broader vision of I want to be able to trust what comes out of my faucet. So yeah, so that's kind of the lawmakers portion. I also saw that I think Megan Loveland was here. Megan was part of the a comms workshop we had earlier this year where we talked about messaging strategies for appealing to private investors and attracting business partners. A lot of communities are wanting business partners, and video is an opportunity to attract that into the region. In that case, we have an opportunity to emphasize demand and feasibility. So if someone has a food co-op, they can asking them questions like, okay, you have a food co-op. Is there a demand for fresh food here and in your community, and why? And they might say, yeah, because otherwise people have to drive 2 hours to go to a grocery store. And so really working with communities to kind of shape this narrative of, there's a lot of demand for what we have to offer. And so speaking in kind of a business context, and then emphasizing partnership, not philanthropy, not just going, look, these communities are really struggling, you should help them out. But it's like these communities are, in a really vibrant, skilled region that has a lot going for it, and you can partner with it. And then promoting local knowledge and informal networks. If there's all these informal networks and people knowing each other and trusting their neighbors, that speeds up hiring times and can reduce turnover rate and all these different things that you can use to appeal to private investors. And so I'll drop a link to that blog that kind of talks about messaging tips. And then the last thing I'll share is, Molly, would you drop the slide for just a second? I just want to present one thing. Thank you. Okay, so the last thing is organizing the structure of the story. We get a lot of interview material when we speak to community members. And it's really helpful to structure the story with color coding. My colleague Kate Rudek did this. So if you interview someone and you get their story on paper, and we'll talk more about the technical aspects of video making in an upcoming webinar, but it's helpful to map it in terms of just basically solution, problem, and then reflection. You can break it up anyway. But if you kind of timestamp it and then color code it, like here it is, just time stamped, and then here's the final story. You can see the kind of symmetry to it. It's like here you have before the flood, then you have recounting the flood, and then you have so it's just a really helpful way because nobody has time. So this really helps to kind of map out the story and a lot of raw footage. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you guys so much for your attention. I'm really excited to hand it over to Mimi Pickering now.
Hi, thank you. Liam, that was great. And you probably covered everything I was going to say. But I have been a part of Apple Shop since the early 70s, and we started in 1969. We were um, part of an effort of the War on Poverty, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and we were part of Community Film Workshop Council, which set up a number of workshops around the country to train young people and people of color in film and television skills. And in those days, most documentary and television was done in 16 millimeter film. Portable video had not really come on the scene, and it was a very expensive medium to work in. And so very few people had access to the means of production. And so this was one effort to create a workforce that was more diverse and could contribute. And it didn't make much sense in Whitesburg, Kentucky to do vocational training for an industry that didn't exist in Whitesburg, Kentucky, or really anywhere in central Appalachia. And so the original director, Bill Richardson, really focused on connecting with young people and talking to them about what stories they'd like to do, and then doing some basic here's how you use the camera, here's how you use the tape recorder. Then after they had come up with a story, they would do that, film some, and then he would work with them on editing. And the early films really focused on friends, neighbors, local characters, and were really well received. And that kind of gave the idea that maybe we could make a go of it as a film workshop located in Whitesburg, Kentucky, and not continue to send our young people away. So that's kind of how Apple Shop got started. It was also a time, the very ending of the war on poverty, where there'd been lots of um, filmmakers, television folks who had come to the region and kind of focused on poverty in the region and as part of the war on poverty. And of course, a lot of really important legislation and policies came out of the war on poverty, but just representing Apple Shop as or not Apple Shop, Appalachia as this poverty-stricken place was certainly not the full story by any means. So Apple Shop really focused on training young people in film and television, and later photography, radio, all kinds of things, and working to tell stories that people in the region wanted to share. And we now have 100 some documentaries that are available on YouTube. Um, we expanded because other young people started coming and saying, well, we'd like to do a theater company that's based on stories from the region, about the region. And Roadside Theater was formed. And musicians came and said, we want to do a record company. And that became June Apple Recordings. And a lot of this work really had at its a core a sense that we want to own what we make. We want to own what we create. Everybody knows about the extractive nature of the economy of much of Appalachia. And not only has that included coal and oil and gas, but and timber, but also culture. Um, and lots of musicians, lots of artists have felt like their work had been taken and exploited, and somebody else had used it and made money from it. So we did we did that, and we started telling stories that were or working with communities outside of Eastern Kentucky, throughout the region. I've done a number of films in West Virginia. Um, and then I was going to talk just a little bit. I know Nick is going to talk about this, but about some of the challenges and divisions that we've faced. And one of the most serious in recent years, somewhat recent years, was the whole coal industry's campaign to promote the war on coal. And this really started around 2012 in central Kentucky, central Appalachia. And it was really saying that the uh, the whole decline in mining employment could be attributed to a war on coal mining that was being led by our politicians. And it became a very, very heated issue in Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, I know. And any critique of the coal industry, and its practices really became fighting words and sometimes threats. Appalshop was threatened at times because our radio station had broadcast programs about strip mining's effects and that kind of thing. So one of the things we did in response was working with a whole group of allies in the region. We started a project called Making Connections News, in which we really focused on people and organizations in the region that were modeling an alternative kinds of economic activities. And we really hope to change the narrative that because the industry, there were huge banners up, like in places like Hazard says, mining is our future, coal is our future. And we knew that that was not going to be possible. No matter who the politicians were, there's a limited amount of coal, and we're all moving away from fossil fuels, hopefully. But anyway, we started telling stories featuring people who were modeling these different kinds of activities, and then collecting them on a website. There's a Making Connections News, which is a little out of date now. And then also we are so lucky that we have WMMT community radio so that we could put a lot of these stories out that way through the radio. And it was really great to work with allies all over the region. And we think that we were successful in changing the narrative. We and lots of other people, and of course, Reimagine Appalachia is a wonderful success story coming out of the efforts to really focus people on a more just transition in the region and show them how that could be. Um, so that's a lot of what I worked on the last few years. Um, and then it's kind of it's we've fought against stereotyping in the region our entire existence. And it's disappointing that it seems like people feel freer to stereotype the region and its people these days. I don't think J.D. Vance did the region's people any favors. And there's an example of a blogger driving through Harlan County and shooting film of dilapidated houses and then ridiculing people living there and then posting that all over the internet. So I think our work is still, really important, and really important that we keep telling the stories of sharing the stories of people who are so resilient and efficient and effective and powerful in their own ways. Um, everyone, and something that's changed since our early days of Apple Shop was, nobody, hardly anybody had the means of producing a documentary. And now everybody's got a movie potential in this camera, in this phone they've got. And people all the time say, I made a movie, but there's a lot to making a movie, as Liam was saying, and that the list of all those things to think about and work on was a really good one. Just turning that phone camera on is not necessarily movie making. But the process is there, the ability is there for a lot more coverage and positive work on this region. So I will turn it over to Nick, who she may not say, but she came up through our media training program, the Appalachian Media Institute. And then she's also gone to college for all of this stuff as well. And now she's at Apple Shop, which is great to have her.
Yeah, I did Apple Shop's summer internship program for 3 years in a row. And then I was a contractor for a time, and then now I'm full time. I have been for 2 years as a full-time filmmaker, which I'm very proud of. But today I'm mainly going to be talking about how to kind of document divisive issues in Appalachia, and how to maintain media ethics as well as you do so. I think mainly I'll discuss the divisive issues part more thoroughly than the media ethics part. But if you are outside of Appalachia or you're from Appalachia, I can send the link to this Canva presentation if you want to see more about the media ethics part. But for now, I think I'll just skip to slide 8 if y'all don't mind. Um,
Are you
I've
seeing it,
used,
Nick?
what is it?
Sorry, are you seeing the presentation?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, this is, I've done a few short films this year, short documentaries, and we call them Apple Shorts. We've been posting them to our YouTube page, and they're usually 15 to 20 minutes long. Um, and they can range from, climate issues. I've done a lot of works on the flood that happened here in 2022. And then very recently, I covered I think we're having some issues with this presentation, but yeah, so there is one power company in our region that provides power for everybody. And they make decisions based on a committee of folks, of 3 people appointed by the governor of Kentucky. And basically, they come to them whenever they have rate increases and anything like that, major decisions. And we have some of the highest power bills, I think, in the country, but we're the second poorest congressional district in the country. And recently they did agree to raise the power rate for folks, businesses, and just regular consumers. And a lot of people had a lot of issues with that, obviously. And there were a lot of town halls where this committee of people took public comment from the public about their opinions on the rate increase, which did end up going through, unfortunately. But I wanted to talk about documenting that. And then I also wanted to talk about documenting protests. I've not done any ICE protests personally, but I have been to protests that were concerning things like abortion, consolidating local schools, um, the Kentucky Power Company raising the rate, things like that. If we could go to the next slide. But yeah, this was a gentleman that was speaking up at the town hall that I went to. But mainly when you're documenting these things, you don't want to show that you're showing agreement to either side. You want to be as neutral as possible and still get the story from both sides. Um, so when I'm filming and I'm sitting in this town hall, I try not to show, any verbal or physical affirmations showing agreement or disagreement. I try to get what folks are saying on both sides. In this situation, I could not interview the committee because it was a legal court kind of deal, and they can't show being impartial to either side. But I did get their comment during the town hall. But if you're local to the story that you're telling, try to keep your personal opinions out of the storytelling process. And if you're non-local, still try to be neutral, but also get context from um, maybe some storytellers that are from the region, because that context can help later on when you're putting the piece together. Be prepared for tension. There was a lady there with a sign that had some vulgarity in it. You might have saw on the last slide. Um, and there was a big kerfuffle about that and about her using some rough language during the town hall. Um, that's about as much tension as I usually expect during these things. But I know during protests it can get more dicey than that, especially if it's not in this region. Um, I usually try to respect a person's wishes not to be filmed, even if it's at a public event, because at public events you are allowed to film as long as it's officially a public event. Um, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, these are some tips that I found to document these divisive issues safely. But like I said, you are allowed to film at public events, even if you're told otherwise. Personal property is different. That's probably not allowed most of the time unless you have permission. But filming from roads is fine as long as you're not obstructing traffic, because you can be arrested for doing that. They will give that excuse when they arrest you. Um, but I have seen where people have said that you make sure all of your GPS time date settings are accurate on your camera, because that can be helpful when you're dating things. Um, but yeah, filming from the road, make sure you're not obstructing traffic. If you are arrested at a protest while you're documenting, definitely pass the camera off to someone trusted, or pass your phone off to someone trusted nearby. And when you're documenting these things, I always usually try to have somebody with me, just for safety reasons in case something happens, and maybe as a witness as well. Can we go to the next slide? This is John Abernathy, and he's an independent reporter, but he made the news in January during an ICE protest, because he was arrested for obstructing traffic, is what they said. But they were arresting him. He tossed his camera to someone nearby because he felt like maybe the photos wouldn't make it, or maybe they would be confiscated. Um, I thought this was a really powerful picture. The Guardian posted an article about it. HuffPost also posted an article about it. The next slide, if you don't mind. But yes, his name is John Abernathy. Um, but they said he had been arrested for obstructing pedestrian and vehicle traffic on federal property. But his photographs made it. And then the picture of him actually throwing the camera is incredible, I thought. But I thought that was a good example of, uh, if I was arrested during a protest, that's what I would try to do is pass off my camera, pass off my phone. Make sure your phone doesn't have Face ID when you go to a protest. A password, a 6-digit password is helpful, because it's very easy to turn your phone towards you. Somebody turn your phone towards you, get your Face ID, unlock your phone, delete all of your pictures off your phone of the protest. So If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, this is what you can bring to a protest. And I would recommend packing light if you bring camera gear. You'll never know when you need to move quickly. Bring water. Um, if you think tear gas may be used, which regionally I've not seen that a lot, but outside of the region, I definitely that's something that happens. Bring protective eye gear or a mask. Bring extra SD cards and extra batteries. And when it's possible, say officer names, officials allowed while you're recording. And bring your ID. I usually, when I'm filming public events, I'll bring my press badge the Apple Shop gave me. I definitely recommend bringing that, and then maybe a personal ID, because a press badge helps people determine whether you're a protester or a member of the press. Um, we could go to the next slide. But yeah, these are some important sources, and Mimi gave me a couple yesterday. Witness that I didn't know about has a lot of helpful tips when you're documenting divisive issues and protests, how to safely do so. And there are laws by state at ACLU's website. I know somebody in the chat was wondering the differences by state. ACLU has every state's laws when you're documenting things like this. Um, and then the Witness YouTube channel I was looking has a lot of helpful tips about protests. That's where I found the information about the Face ID and the phone, 6-digit code on your phone instead of Face ID, and like what gear to bring and what interactions should be, especially documented. If we could go to the next slide. But yeah, I've not done a ton of very, particularly rough protests. Most of my protests have been in a courthouse, or like a town hall that's gotten a little bit verbal. But, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, you're there to get their story. You want to get both sides of the story, and you want to be as neutral as you can be, because both sides of the story are important, no matter what your opinion is on the issue. Um, but yeah, just stay calm. Um, Try not to show that you're on one side or the other. Try to always have your ID on you and that kind of thing. Pack lot. Um, but yeah, if y'all have any more questions, and I will um, post the link to that presentation. And there's some more in there about media ethics in Appalachia. Um, but yeah, I think that's all I have for y'all if you have questions later on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Mimi or Nick? See if I can, I'll look through here too.
I
I
was
have,
going to
sorry.
respond to what was Nick was saying. It really is important to get, other perspectives, or to get different sides of the story. And what I keep going back to is Ann Lewis's film on that's called Mine War on Blackberry Creek, where she actually interviewed Don Blankenship. You all from West Virginia probably know Don Blankenship, who was the running the coal company then. And it can be difficult to get access to those folks, but you just have to really be honest, tell them what you're doing. And, you know, Anne is a very pro-union person, but she didn't, she made an honest film. And Blankenship really he really does himself in, which so often is the case when you get those interviews. You don't have to jump, you don't have to attack them, you don't have to yell at them, just have a civil conversation, and you can ask some hard questions, but they'll usually show themselves for who they are. And I'm sorry to interrupt that question.
I was wondering, how do you like salvage if you capture an event like that and it's really tense and people are really disputing, having a really heavy argument? Like, how do you salvage something like that and use it for something constructive? Like, what's your approach to that?
I think get as much of it as you can. Um, and I think at the more verbal, like, there was a incident at the town hall where the chairwoman of the committee for the Kentucky Power increase uh, got on to somebody for using, vulgarity. She didn't want any vulgarity at the committee meeting. But I put the clip in its entirety of the woman who was, using some rough language because I felt like it was important not to censor that. Um, I don't think cutting it down would help anybody. I think it's good to get the whole story, the raw, unedited part of that. Um, but yeah, that was the most rough I've the roughest encounter I've had while filming anything, and that was not bad at all.
When we were doing a documentary about the efforts to overturn the broad form mine property without the owner's permission, we were filming on a man's property that was being mined against his wishes, and one of the kind of foremen on the job came down and pushed the camera, kind of attacked, and the rest of the crew, rallied around, and we were with the property owner, and he was like, "I'm on my land, I'm on my land," and it didn't go any further. But it sure made great video when we included it in the documentary. Um, it was, just very telling. But of course, it could have been a lot more dangerous. Got to be careful.
Yeah. And if anybody else has any thoughts about that, like in your experience of how you gather something constructive of that, please share and come off mute and share. And one question I had for you, Mimi, was about this. You were talking about showing the difficulties sometimes that there are in the region, but not showing this kind of negative story of victimization or re-perpetuating this re-perpetuating a negative narrative. And I was wondering, like, what are some strategies you might use? Or maybe it's not even a strategy, maybe it's just an intuitive approach or something to approach really sensitive issues where people are really struggling without without feeding into a kind of like a negative narrative that just re-perpetuates a negative view of Appalachian people, the rural people.
Well, I think it's really important to, you were talking about trust, to have the trust of the people that you're interviewing and to be respectful of them. But then um, to take your time doing interviews, that often um, makes people feel more comfortable and can more fully tell their stories. And I think it's just important to not only focus on these issues and problems, but also, as we were saying earlier, kind of um, show the solutions that people have come up with and how they're, taking them on. In the film that I did with Ann Lewis, Chemical Valley, at the very end of it, we interview one of the residents of Institute, West Virginia, and it's a difficult issue living next to a chemical plant and people being poisoned, but she just talks about, we've become empowered. It's empowered us, this whole process of fighting this and working together. And so, including, those comments from people, those statements from people, I think is really important. Um, it's also, everybody looks at things with their own biases and their own eyes. So, I'd say that some people could look at some of Appleshop's films and see, poverty and degradation and this and that, but most people don't. But it is hard to you can't always tell how people will interpret the images and the words they hear. But I think showing people in their fullness, in their full story, really helps. I did want to say one thing that I didn't say, and that one thing we've found is how empowering it's been for people to participate in these films and radio stories and to be able to tell their stories and to share their stories with other people. It's really, being able to, as Paulo Freire has a great quote about speaking your own words, your own story is a step towards transformation and empowerment for you. And I think that, we've really found that. Also, we've done a series, we've worked with the Kentucky Department for Public Health on their diabetes prevention program and worked with people in Eastern Kentucky who are pre-diabetic or diabetic, and they're telling their stories of managing that and what it's like. And we think that's really an effective way to reach people when they can hear, their neighbors or people who sound like them and whose lives seem similar to their own. And these folks are making changes, and to be healthier. And so I think that's one of the really great impacts that storytelling and, video, audio has.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I saw too this question from Jeff Allen about increasing production value with a phone. And that's a really good point. It's like, I mean, okay, phones are kind of getting insanely good camera quality. I recently got one with the three camera holes, which was a big step up for me. But the one thing I think that really helps if you can't get a really amazing camera is just like the effects, like the production effects like audio, sound, or motion. Like Reimagine, we've gotten a lot of gimbals, like which is basically a motion stabilizer, makes the motion of your phone look really smooth and cinematic. So kind of maybe you can never fully replace a good camera, but you can kind of work around it to some effect, yeah, in cinematic ways. Curious if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was responding in the chat, but the audio can be absolutely as important as the visual. So don't forget the audio.
Yeah. And you have a question from Katie Gordon. Do you have an interview anywhere, Mimi Pickering from Apple Shop? I'd love to watch it. Maybe you want to say more about that, but
What's the question?
do you have an interview anywhere?
Yeah, I think there are some. The University of Kentucky Louis B. Nunn Oral History Archive has a whole series of interviews with Apple Shop staff, and there's one of me there and quite a few of early Apple Shop staff. That's a great resource, that Oral History Archive.
All right. Christopher, do you want to come off mute and ask this question? If not, that's totally cool. I can read it out.
No, I can. Yeah, I'm just sometimes. So I'm in Western Pennsylvania, and we do some different community documentary storytelling. And sometimes we're working on a story that's pressing for our community, and we're like, there's just like a couple of us, and we're like, we have to do research. We have to figure out how to tell this authentically, and maybe we just don't have the capacity to. So I'm just wondering, I guess Mimi or anyone else's experience, Nick, if you come across that and you're like, how do we manage doing this so it's like an honest story that's well told and accurate when we maybe don't have the capacity?
A lot of the people from the town hall film that I did about the power rate increase, a lot of people that attended that, like ordinary citizens, brought like a book of research that they did. Um, and sometimes you can just talk to those folks and see what sources they have pulled things from, and what they've been reading. There was a school teacher that brought a lesson plan for the committee members and was like, I need you to look at all this stuff about Kentucky Power. And I need you to study this. And I need you politicians in this room to study this too. So a lot of the time, the people that care about these issues have a lot of info that you can get. Um, so you're not doing as much digging, I guess. Um, but yeah, that surprised me that so many people came up during that meeting and had like a booklet or thing or documents to give out to people at the meeting about information they had found about Kentucky Power and about the laws um, at that meeting. But yeah, I hope that is helpful at all.
And
And there
oh,
aren't
go
many
ahead.
resources, i.e. money available to support filmmaking and documenting, which is really, really too bad. Unfortunately, it has gotten a lot less expensive with the equipment, of course, and then being able to post it on the web or whatever. But for the people, as you're talking, Christopher, it's people power that has to think through the project and then schedule interviews and then edit them a, a in a moving way. That's a lot. That effort has not disappeared.
So I appreciate those responses. I guess I'm just kind of wondering, like, when you feel like you're interacting with the research and you're trying to avoid like the spread of information, are you doing like an additional layer of like research? Okay, like, okay, let me look down this road of this research to see like it's verifiable, and I don't know, just kind of teasing it out, I guess. But
I think we do it to the extent possible.
thanks.
Thanks, Christopher. And yeah, I mean and we have and please, if there's any questions up top that I'm missing, please bump them up. But yeah, in our case, like it's what's been really helpful, and this I'm sure you have tons of time saving strategies, so I don't know if this, but this is just one of the things is just structuring the questions and maybe sometimes offering people stipends, like definitely with our process, it's like if we can offer someone a stipend to kind of give the story for us and we give them clear instructions of what we want and then they film themselves, then that saved a lot of time. And then one person can just go through, timestamp everything they said, and then structure an interview out of that. And then we don't have to travel anywhere. And they kind of provide the information to us. So I'm sure if anyone else has really cool solutions or ideas for Christopher, please come off mute and share them. But that's one thing that saved time.
And
And I saw, sorry.
Ian probably mentions it in his workshops, but there is the whole question of release forms, and we're not always as good as we should be in getting a signed release form from the people we are interviewing, but it can protect you. And the release form we have says, that you you sort of you swear that what you're saying is basically true, not misinformation. But if you're in kind of a potentially controversial situation or something, getting the subject to sign a release form will protect you legally.
That's really good to know. Um,
We can
and I
share
guess,
that too.
yeah, please. And everything will be shared out after this. And I think we have time for like one or two more questions. But from Avery, Avery, do you want to come off mute and ask this question about slop?
Yeah, I guess I know from my own social media experience, it's very hard to balance like creating quality content and on algorithms that just reward constant posting and reward rage baiting. And, people have to say something that like a hot take at the beginning of a video to get anyone to listen, right? So, I'm wondering, how do you like, how do you manage that? How do you make sure that you're still getting your message out on these platforms that do not prioritize quality storytelling while like keep making sure that you're still creating quality, accurate content. So
It's hard. Nick, you want to? Nick
Yeah,
just finished a short film called Queer Jobs, which has already gotten some flack.
yeah. I think well it featured a trans woman and a non-binary woman in the film, and right away on the social media post there was a lot of people in the comments saying some very, very rude things. But as for like prior prioritizing quality over, quantity and algorithms and stuff, you can chase an algorithm to the end of the earth. It's always changing. And I think, what's most important is making sure the subject is at the forefront of the post. You're putting it in the main line of the post. Um, and make sure the graphic or the picture you're using is clear. I've heard the algorithm likes a face, so I try to put faces first on the first, like if you're doing something on Instagram, the first picture, if you have a picture of a person, make sure that's the first picture. The rest of the pictures, I don't think matters as much. But I usually try to prioritize quality and information over, a clickbait thing. Because I think at the end of the day, people want more information over, looking at a tagline and then getting really, really upset and fighting with somebody in the comments for an hour on Facebook. Um, but yeah, Apple Shop, it was not doing, any sort of clickbait, rage bait, whatever on that queer jobs post. We were just simply talking about the film, and the subjects of the film, and that was enough for people to engage and not some of them weren't engaging very nicely, but um, I think just try to stay true to what the nature of your post is, and um, eventually, you'll see some payoff from it. It's hard at first, but I think people stay for quality over quantity.
And Avery, I just one personal thought I had about that was my usually I try to just always go for the hopeful stuff, but I think there is a potential opportunity for being kind of humor, not rage baiting, but a little bit humorous in moments when it's like a really dark issue. And it's like you can either kind of do something that kind of not trivializes something. And I'm interested too in what your thoughts on it, Avery, are, but like kind of goes uses a little bit of humor, a little bit of satire when it's so dark anyway that if you just presented it as it was, it would be just kind of oppressive or kind of downbeat. And that's a kind of opportunity using humor as, or things that kind of get people's attention as a counterbalance, but not to troll, just to kind of
yeah.
put something in a new light to make it palatable.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that like, saying a whatever the core of the video's message is in like a hot take right at the beginning always really helps with the algorithm, but it's always just like, you want your content to be professional and reliable and like it's always a constant, push and pull with that and algorithms that do not prioritize quality.
Yeah, well said. So just out of respect for the speaker's time, do you guys want, are you guys, oh, sorry, Mimi, do you have any last thoughts for that? No?
No, I mean, it's great to have been part of this conversation.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, really great for me too. And thanks to everyone who attended and for your questions. I'm going to save all of this and send it out in a follow-up tomorrow or tomorrow. And yeah, so this has been Reimagine an Apple Shop, and we'll also share out everyone's social media links that you shared. And yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.